Amid the energy of late 16th century London, apprentices hurried through streets, theater-goers gathered at playhouses, and merchants traded goods from distant lands in a time of cultural flowering and plague threats. This was the Elizabethan era, under the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, a period when England was emerging as a naval power and a center of artistic innovation, yet shadowed by the ever-present specter of disease and social upheaval. London, with its swelling population nearing 200,000 souls by the turn of the century, was a city of contrasts. Grand timber-framed houses rubbing shoulders with squalid tenements, the aroma of fresh-baked bread mingling with the stench of open sewers, and the clamor of commerce echoing against the quiet tolling of church bells. As the sun rose on a typical spring morning in 1590, the city stirred to life with a rhythm honed by centuries of habit and necessity. The first hints of dawn filtered through the narrow, overhanging upper stories of houses along Fleet Street, casting long shadows on the uneven cobblestones below. Roosters crowed from backyard coops, and the distant lowing of cattle being driven to market added to the awakening symphony. In modest households, families rose early, fathers and sons preparing for their trades, mothers tending to hearths where porridge simmered over peat fires. Hygiene was rudimentary. A quick splash from a basin of cold water sufficed for most, as bathhouses were a luxury reserved for the middling sort or the wealthy, who might indulge in scented soaps imported from France or Italy. Apprentices, often boys as young as 12, were among the first to venture out. Bound by 7-year contracts to master craftsmen, they lived in their employers' homes, learning skills like shoemaking, tailoring, or blacksmithing. Take young Thomas, a fictional but representative apprentice to a wool merchant in Cheapside. He rubbed sleep from his eyes, donned his woolen breeches and doublet, and stepped into the chill air. The streets were already alive with purpose. Water carriers hauling buckets from the conduits at Cornhill, their cries of fresh water piercing the mist. Bakers' boys darted about, balancing trays of manchet loaves, fine white bread for the better-off, while the poorer folk made do with coarser rye or barley bread. London's markets were the lifeblood of the city, and by mid-morning, stalls at Smithfield or Billingsgate would be teeming with vendors hawking everything from Cheshire cheese to Spanish oranges, the latter an exotic treat brought by ships from the New World explorations. The River Thames, snaking through the heart of London, was more than a waterway. It was the city's artery, ferrying goods and people alike. Wharves along the north bank bustled with dockers unloading bales of cloth from Antwerp or barrels of wine from Bordeaux. Watermen in their flat-bottomed wherries shouted for passengers, offering crossings to Southwark for a penny. On this day, as on most, the river was crowded with vessels. Elegant royal barges with gilded prows for the nobility, sturdy merchant ships flying the flags of the Muscovy Company, and humble fishing boats netting eels and salmon from the murky waters. The bridge, London Bridge, the only crossing over the Thames, was a marvel and a bottleneck, its 19 arches supporting houses, shops, and even a chapel. Traffic jammed as carts, horses, and pedestrians vied for space, the heads of traitors displayed on pikes at the southern gate serving as a grim reminder of the Queen's justice. By noon, the city's pulse quickened. In the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral, whose spire dominated the skyline until struck by lightning a few years prior, booksellers and stationers set up booths, peddling pamphlets on everything from astrological predictions to the latest ballads about Drake's exploits against the Spanish Armada. Merchants in the Royal Exchange, built by Sir Thomas Gresham in 1565, conducted business in a babel of languages: Dutch, Italian, Portuguese, trading silks from the Orient and spices from the Indies. The middling classes, including lawyers from the Inns of Court and clerks from the guilds, paused for midday meals, perhaps a pie filled with mutton or eel, washed down with small beer, the low-alcohol brew safe for daily consumption since water was often contaminated. Social hierarchies were evident everywhere. The nobility, with their ruffs of fine linen and velvet cloaks embroidered with gold thread, moved through the streets in coaches or on horseback, attended by servants. Sumptuary laws dictated clothing by class. Only the elite could wear purple silk or fur trimmings, enforcing a visual order in this chaotic metropolis. Yet mobility was possible. Successful merchants like those in the Cloth Workers' Company could amass fortunes rivaling lords, buying country estates and marrying into gentry. For the poor, life was harsher. Almshouses provided some relief, but beggars and vagrants risked whipping or branding under the poor laws. Plague outbreaks, like the devastating one in 1593 that would claim thousands, loomed as a constant fear, prompting quarantines and the painting of red crosses on infected doors. As the afternoon unfolded, leisure beckoned for those who could afford it. The theaters on the South Bank, outside the city's strict jurisdiction, drew crowds eager for Shakespeare's early plays or Marlowe's dramatic verses. The Globe, though not yet built in 1590, had precursors like the theater in Shoreditch, where groundlings paid a penny to stand in the pit, while galleries offered seats for the better-heeled. Performances began at 2 p.m., announced by flags and trumpets, featuring tales of kings, lovers, and clowns that mirrored the era's obsessions with power, romance, and folly. Nearby, bear-baiting arenas provided bloodier entertainment, with chained bears pitted against mastiffs to the cheers of gamblers. In the workshops, labor continued unabated. Goldsmiths in Lombard Street hammered intricate designs into plate, while printers in Paternoster Row churned out broadsides on Gutenberg-style presses. Women, though barred from many guilds, contributed vitally, spinning wool at home, brewing ale for sale, or managing market stalls. Children scampered underfoot, some attending petty schools to learn their ABCs from horn books, others already working as chimney sweeps or errand runners. The air carried a medley of scents: smoke from countless chimneys, the tang of tanneries along the Fleet Ditch, the sweetness of herb gardens where rosemary and lavender grew to ward off illness. Evenings approached with a softening of the day's frenzy. Taverns like the Mermaid in Bread Street filled with patrons sharing tankards of sack, sweet wine, and debating the news. Rumors of Catholic plots, victories over Irish rebels, or the Queen's latest progresses through the countryside. Street cries faded as vendors packed up, replaced by the watchman's calls as lanterns were lit, though London streets remained dimly illuminated, inviting pickpockets and footpads. In homes, families gathered for supper, perhaps boiled beef with mustard, root vegetables, and pudding, followed by prayers before bed. The city never fully slept. Night soil men collected waste under cover of darkness, and the bells of over 100 churches marked the hours. Yet this normal day held undercurrents of change. The cultural flowering, evident in the poetry of Spenser, the music of Byrd, and the explorations of Raleigh, fueled optimism, but threats abounded. Religious tensions simmered between Protestants and recusant Catholics, enforced by fines and spies. Economic pressures mounted as enclosures displaced rural folk, swelling the urban underclass. And always the plague. Whispers of fever in neighboring parishes could empty streets overnight.